The following program, Live and Learn, is made possible by Aging Partners. Find out more on their website at agingpartners@lincoln.ne.gov.
This is Live and Learn, and my name is Chris Beckenbaugh. It's that time of year again. Not only are the leaves starting to fall, but it's time for Medicare Part D open enrollment. Our guest today is Houston Doan, and he is the expert at Aging Partners in this subject. Welcome, Houston.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate the opportunity, as always, to speak to you and to our audience on Live and Learn.
Great. Well, last year we saw some changes with the advent of the Affordable Care Act, and I'm sure as there's additional implementation this year, we're going to see more. Is that right?
Well, yes and no. Luckily, for our people on Medicare, the Affordable Care Act really has minimal impact on our beneficiaries in the Medicare system. Now, one of the positive impacts of the Affordable Care Act is by 2020, there will actually be the elimination of the gap in coverage or the donut hole in Medicare Part D. Now, that gap in coverage benefit will be closing slowly up to 2020. But really, this year, once you go into the gap in coverage, or the donut hole is what it's called, you will experience a 52.5% discount on your brand name prescriptions and a 22% discount on your generics, which will substantially lower your out-of-pocket costs during that donut hole. But the nice thing is that the bulk of the dollars spent for your brand name and your generic all goes toward your true out-of-pocket costs. And if you've been in the program, there are initial coverages, the gap in coverage, and then something called catastrophic coverage. That is when you reach a certain true out-of-pocket spending for your prescription drug plans, there's a safety net that kicks in, and you basically are responsible for 5% of the cost of the drugs. Your prescription drug plan picks up 95%. And that's been a godsend for many of our beneficiaries that find themselves in extremely expensive medication regimens, primarily cancer
Treatments
patients and
Okay.
that. So, but yeah, there are some changes coming, but by and large, the Affordable Care Act is primarily aimed at those 65 and younger.
Okay.
So really, we're not terribly concerned about the impact there. Of course, there are some big changes coming for people under the age of 65 and the Affordable Care Act. And of course, that's going to start in October as well. So there's going to be a lot of action at the Lincoln Area Agency on Aging, Aging Partners, and trying to get the right people into the right program. So it's going to be an exciting fall and early winter for us.
So, is there a change in the deductible this year?
Oh, I'm glad you asked, because rarely do I get to deliver good news when it comes to Medicare benefits. Usually the deductibles go up, the monthly cost for Part B goes up. This year, the deductible will actually go down. It will go down to $310 in 2014. In 2013, it's $325. So we're going to experience a decrease in the deductible, which is great news.
That is great news.
Yeah,
it's great news.
Yeah.
How about the initial coverage limit? Will there be
Well,
an increase?
again, that will be going down as well, correspondingly. As I recall, it will go down approximately $120. I've got the exact figure here. It's going to go down from, well, about $200 really. it'll go down to $28.50. This year it's $29.70. I guess that is $120.
That is $120.
Yeah, and so the nice thing is that while we get a reduction in the deductible, we're going to reach the gap in coverage a little quicker.
Okay.
But again, the limits on the gap in coverage will come down, so we'll get into the catastrophic even more quickly this year. So by and large, it's a good thing.
Good.
For our beneficiaries.
Good. So how frequently should a senior review their Medicare Part D coverage?
Well, I always encourage my clients to look every year. Now, human nature being what it is, if it's not broken, don't fix it. But really, with Medicare Part D, it's not a bad idea to at least review every other year. And quite candidly, if you have not reviewed your Part D coverage in 3 years, last year we saved individuals on an average of about $300 or $400 a year by just reviewing their plans and making sure they were in the correct plan. So it's money in beneficiaries' pockets to do the review. And, while it is time consuming, golly, for an hour of their time, we can probably give them $300 or $400. So those are pretty good wages.
Besides you, Houston, are there others at the agency that can help with that? Or?
Oh, yes. We typically every fall during open enrollment, which is October 15th to December 7th, we have other people that do things like what I do. Neil Sandoz, as a matter of fact, is the other insurance and financial counselor. Also at Aging Partners, we have volunteers that come in. We kind of run a clinic, pretty much ongoing, that our beneficiaries can call in, get an appointment, come in, we can review their prescriptions. Additionally, people are blessed to be in Lincoln and Lancaster County because we have a wonderful senior health insurance information program, SHIP, run through the Department of Insurance, the Nebraska Department of Insurance, and they too offer clinics or opportunities for individuals to make an appointment, take their prescriptions in, and review. And those are really held all over the city, in the libraries, out at Southeast Community College, at about 86th and O. So there are some good opportunities. I know that Brian's 55 Plus program offers services as well for individuals that want to check on their Part D coverage. So there are some very good opportunities in Lincoln. I encourage all of our beneficiaries, please take a look. Sometimes they're in the right plan, but gosh, if you're not in the right plan, you can really save a lot of money.
And all of these sources that you talked about are unbiased. They don't have anything to sell. They don't have anything to gain by steering you in one direction or another.
Absolutely. No one's going to be getting a commission or anything like that. That's correct.
That's great. Well, I know in our next issue of Living Well, there'll be an article about this.
Correct. A little more detail so people can understand a little more about what's coming along and what's going to happen.
So we're encouraging reviewing that article, making an appointment with a professional to get some, either with your office or with SHIP or with 55 Plus.
Yeah.
I know there's other communities and senior living communities that are hosting these seminars.
Right, yeah.
And how else could any other way to get advice?
Well, that's a great question. It seems like today more and more seniors are computer literate. As a matter of fact, that's the fastest growing segment of computer users in America right now, are those 65 and older. There's a wonderful website, www.medicare.gov, and there's actually a tool on the Medicare website where you can go in, enter your zip code, enter your prescriptions, and you can check for yourself. That's a wonderful, wonderful resource. Or if you're like me, I have grandchildren that are really good, and you can prevail upon them to help you do that as well.
Well, that sounds like a nice gift you could give to a senior who's not computer literate.
That's
Just sit
true.
down and do that with
Yeah.
them. So they'd need all of their current prescriptions and what they're paying for them.
Right, right.
And they'd need their zip code. Anything else?
Really, to do the initial check, no. Now, if they do need to change plans, they would need their Medicare card, their red, white, and blue card, date of birth, address, phone number, simple kinds of things. And you can actually change plans on that website,
Excellent.
which is a great, great opportunity for individuals that, want to do it themselves.
Well, that's wonderful. So it's kind of a no muss, no fuss, but can save you
Yeah.
a lot of money.
It can save lots of money.
Is there opportunities to change other times throughout the year? Let's say your health situation changes and you want to change your coverage. Is that possible?
That's a great question, and thank you, because up to 2012, the very end of 2012, this program started in 2006. So for 6 years, no. Once you picked a plan, you were stuck with that plan, unless, of course, you qualified for help through the low-income subsidy or went on to Medicaid. Now, today, if you find yourself having to really take a hard look at your medications and will my plan cover them, and if that plan is not doing a good job, you do have the opportunity anytime during that year, this year or next year, to go into something called a 5-star prescription drug plan. Now, that's a rating that Medicare assigns prescription drug plans. It's based on a number of things, primarily customer service. But you can switch to a 5-star plan. In Nebraska, there's only one 5-star plan right now. It's Blue Cross Blue Shield. But you would have that opportunity anytime during the year to switch. And we actually have done that a couple of times for individuals that found themselves in basically dramatic, life-changing situations. Yeah.
So open enrollment, remind me again, runs?
October 15th through December 7th.
Okay. And then if you miss that window, you can still come in
And
look at
pick
your
a
plan.
5-star plan, correct. Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to share with our viewers?
Well, last year there were some nice changes. One of the biggest changes is that now Part D plans must cover barbiturates and benzodiazepines. So that has been a great benefit for a lot of our senior citizens.
So for our viewers, just really quickly, what's a barbiturate and what's a benzodiazepine?
Well, benzodiazepine could include things like, I believe Lexapro is one.
Okay.
A barbiturate, of course, is pain. Primarily they're used to treat epilepsy, these seizures, those kinds of things.
Okay.
And so that has been a real boon for a lot of our
Absolutely.
beneficiaries.
That's terrific.
Yeah.
Well, Houston, it's been wonderful as always to gather all this information from you. And I would encourage our viewers to contact Aging Partners at 402-441-7070 and to look for that copy of Living Well magazine.
Thank you so much for the opportunity again to talk about Medicare Part D.
It's my pleasure. And Live and Learn will be right back.
Thank you for joining us on this session of Live and Learn. I'm your host, Tim Francis. My guest today is a 4th-generation Lincoln business owner, Jay Merritt from Merritt Sand and Gravel.
Thank you.
Jay, what year did your family start the business in Lincoln? And
They incorporated in 1904, but my great-grandfather came here in the late 1890s and started making cement block and selling sand and gravel and cement bags. They came from California. California back in the late 1890s, they had a lot of, from the story from my grandfather, he said that there was a lot of earthquakes, fires, floods, and nothing's really changed in 100 years. And he heard Lincoln was a hot spot for building, and a friend of his told him to come to Lincoln. So they packed up their wagon or hopped on the train, I don't know what they did, and they came to Lincoln and got a little spot and started making concrete block.
So a lot of that concrete block is still in place, still serving in old houses and foundations.
It is. A lot of the block around the central part of town that has like a rock face on it, those are probably my great-grandfather's and my grandfather's block. They made them up till about the 1960s and all kinds, and then they kind of changed directions a little bit. And but we still, basically do the same thing we always have.
And you're operating out of the same location.
Same location. My great-grandpa bought a house and a barn on 26th and Randolph, and it was all houses right through there. And he just, as his business grew, he'd buy a house, and he pretty well ended up buying the whole block. And had a couple mule barns to haul material in, and a hay barn to feed the animals, and then the other buildings were to make block and keep material in, and that's what they've done.
So he would have been a supplier to all the home builders.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And a lot of the commercial builders for block, and back then it was a lot of stucco and plaster, and everything was mortared together back in the old days, and so he kept pretty busy and grew the business really well.
What was his source for sand and gravel? Where did he procure that?
It's always been up by the Platte River, usually up by Ashland, between Ashland and Valley, and they've always had rail down to Lincoln, and they would get rail cars of sand and gravel, to make product. And then in the late 20s, they decided to do their own gravel pumping. And my grandfather really excelled in that and learned how to do it well. And he pumped gravel all over the state, all over Kansas, all over Iowa. His biggest job he ever did was he built the Trenton Dam out by McCook.
Really?
Mm-hmm. And they also did up on the Platte River by Plattsmouth, and one of his gravel pits ended up being a swimming lake.
Oh, is that right?
Mm-hmm. And it's called Merritt Beach, and a lot of people from Lincoln and Omaha and around, they'd go swimming there 7 days a week, and it was a really neat place. It was big bathhouses and swings in the water and surfboards and picnicking, and it is a really neat place. And it closed down when my grandmother died back in late 80s, and but it ran for about 60 years.
And then your father came into the business.
My father came in the business probably when he was a little kid. He helped my grandpa do whatever he could, and either lift block and set them out in the yard, or shovel sand for people, unload railroad cars, and he did that pretty much his whole life. Then he went to Korean War for a couple of years, and then came back and worked there straight about 55 years until he was 75.
And that led to you participating.
That led to me. I was lucky enough to work with him for about 30 years, and I think he taught me well. He was a straight shooter kind of a guy, and his philosophy was quality and service, and to be honest, as well as my grandpa and grandpa, and that's the way we've always been. And I've been just working hard, and it's been a good family business over the years, but it does take a lot of hard work.
Well, you've weathered some storms.
Weathered a lot of storms, probably more recessions and depressions than most companies in Lincoln. I think we've gone through them all, and I think the key in weathering those storms is to be conservative and frugal, yet take care of your men and your equipment and your customers. And as long as you do that, and you can usually weather every storm. And that's what we've done for 115 years.
Well, you would have occasion, I suppose, to always have to stay ahead of the curve business-wise, or what?
Yeah,
How things change or evolve.
yeah, some of it's luck, and some of it, you see things coming, and we've always stayed the same, selling sand and cement, and taking care of the bricklayers and block layers in town, and a lot of the home builders and plumbers. We haul them a lot of gravel and products for their houses. And then we just adapt and change a little bit to the economy and changes in building. So, but we try to stay the same, and it seems to be working.
It's got to be a challenge to be able to maintain a payroll and have enough help, but not too much payroll when business drops off.
That is true. The good thing about our business is my dad, my grandpa, my great-grandpa, even my wife, we're not afraid to work hard, and if something needs to be done, we jump in a truck, jump in a tractor, lift, shovel, whatever needs to be to keep things going, and that keeps your employment down when times are tough, and keeps our service and quality good, and so that's what we do when times are tough, and when things are good, we hire a few more guys and just keep putting along.
If what advice would you have for anyone working in a family business or a small local business to kind of guide them as they
Guide them. Listen to your elders, because they've been around a long time, and when you're young you think you know it all, but you don't. But you bring a lot of new ambitions and stuff to the business, and that makes a new generation of ideas and enthusement. But just be disciplined, be frugal, don't spend money you don't have, and always be honest, and treat your customers well, and give them a fair value, but you still got to make some money, and if you do that, you'll always succeed. You really will.
is there a fifth generation going to go into this?
I've had my son, who's 25 now. He's helped us over the years in the summer, and he has decided he wants to be a doctor. So this year he's gone off to med school. I'm sure he'll help us when he can, but I don't know what'll happen in this business. But we've made it to 5 generations, and we're pretty proud of that. It's my dad said we could quit when we hit 100 years, but I'm gonna keep going as long as I can, and enjoy what I do. And I like to see Lincoln and all its construction and all things that are happening. It's just amazing. This town just keeps growing bit by bit, and but we'll see what happens.
So you've been here for a big share of that growth.
Yep.
115 years.
115 years, and I plan to work quite a bit longer. And as long as you enjoy what you do and keep your customers happy, it's all good.
Excellent. Jay, I think we're out of time, but I thank you for being my guest today.
Well, thank you very much.
And I think they'll be showing some photographs that you brought, showing
Yeah, those are great.
the location of your business. And,
Yeah, that's good.
For Live and Learn, I'm Tim Francis, and I thank you for joining us today.
pies, peppermint swirls, onion skins. I'm Kristen Stowes, and those are clues to our topic today on Live and Learn. Give up? How about agates or steelies? I'm pleased to welcome Dion Barr, founder of Barr Vermeer Hacker Architects, avid artist, sculpturer, and marble collector. Welcome, Dion.
Good to be here.
Very good to have you here today. Marble collecting is just one of your many talents and interests. Please tell us how you got started on this journey of marble collecting.
Well, my mother, my dear mother who saved everything, when I, about 30 or 40 years ago, found my original stash of marbles that I used to play with. And I was so fascinated by that. And then it just so happens that maybe a week later, I went to a garage sale and somebody had a half a bushel basket full of marbles, and I bought them, and that started the whole thing. I started amassing marbles, and I guess I can't stop, so I'm still enjoying it.
And how many marbles do you have in your collection?
Well, in excess of 50,000 marbles. You know, I don't count them every day.
That is mind-boggling, but at least they're small, right?
Yeah, they're small.
They're small. Where do you like to look for marbles?
Well, it's getting harder to find marbles because they're becoming more of a collectible. However, you can find them in garage sales, at auctions, not very good places to buy marbles. But then you can also go to marble shows. There's marble shows all over the country where dealers and collectors bring their marbles and are willing to sell them.
Really?
But that's the best way if you really want to buy some decent marbles.
Sure. So is it really the thrill of the hunt that you enjoy when you come upon a marble that you have truly wanted to add to your collection?
That's part of it. The other part is just a deep disease that I have that I love to collect.
Okay.
And so I have many collections, and it's just fun for me. It keeps me active and
Certainly.
keeps the mind connected.
What is it about marbles in particular that attracts you?
Well, what's great about marbles is if you're a visual person, every marble is different. And so they're unique. But then you start to enjoy the patterns and the rarity and the condition and know some of the history of marbles, and pretty soon you're kind of a hooked collector.
Oh, I see. Well, they are all beautiful and very unique to each other. I love them. Could you tell us a little bit about the history of marbles?
Well, yeah, some people call marbles the oldest toy that exists. And marbles were found in the tombs in Egypt. Pharaohs apparently played with them. There's references in Roman literature about marbles. And as you know, the Romans, they acquired lots of different countries, so that spread the marble, not industry, but fun into these other countries too. So it was, that's part of the history. Some of the enthusiasts even think that David, when he picked the rock for his slingshot, might have been a marble, but that's
sure. And there are many historical figures that were marble players.
Yeah, there was I got a note here. There's a guy by the name of Athenius. He was a Roman writer, and reference that someone could win the queen's hand in marriage if they could be a good marble player.
Really?
And I won't go into the detail, but they talk about how they did that. If you hit the queen marble and then hit it again, you were considered one of the suitors. But really, the golden age of marbles was from like the 20s to the 30s. And most of the audience that might be between 60 and 80, they grew up in that age. And I'm sure that they would know a lot of the things that are shown here on the table, because marbles was very popular back then.
And fun names have been given to marbles over the years that I know our viewers would like to hear. You have some to
I have
tell us
actually
about?
a list. I mean, you know, it's sort of like any hobby, I guess, or game. There's jargon that goes along with it, but it's pretty rich language of the names of marbles, like Mibs or clod knockers, commies, hoodies, taws, clams, ducks, immies, clearies, glassies, gabolas, puries. You know, these are kids' names they're adding to these marbles. Peewees, moonies, aggies, moon aggies, alleys, American fried. Now, American fried was marbles that you put in the oven and heated up, and then you took them out and put them in ice water, and they would crackle, and they make kind of pretty patterns. But Steelies, burn boozer, bowlers, cat eyes, clays, doughies, crockies, milkies, zebras. And then some of you may remember some of the comic books about that time. There was Popeye and some of those, but they had marbles with Popeye on them.
Really?
Oxblood bricks. And then other comic marbles were for like Kale, Bimbo, Skeezix, Smitty, Emma,
Skeezix, yes.
Coco, Moonin, Betty Boop. So I mean, you know, they really did have fun, not only playing marbles, but having your own language.
And
for
can you actually recognize a lot of those
Oh, yeah.
classifications in
Yeah.
your marble collection?
Yeah, I've got them all.
You've got them all. Well, there you go. Out of 50,000, you probably do. Does a sphere have to be a specific size to be considered a marble?
Obviously, you don't play marbles with some of these larger marbles, but they are considered marbles. But the average marble that you play with, if you're in a tournament, it can't be smaller than 5/8 of an inch or larger than 3/4 of an inch. And 3/4 of an inch is about this size, and that's the size you like to use as a shooter because it has a little more mass and is going to knock those marbles out of the circle.
All right. All the competitive nature comes out when you pick up those marbles.
Oh,
then, doesn't
absolutely.
it?
Yep.
Yes, that's right. You have brought several groupings of marbles that we would like to show one by one and have you tell us about the kinds of marbles that are in that group. And our first group is the stone.
That's this group of marbles. These are limestone marbles, and they actually they are also the oldest marbles that I have here. These were made in the middle 1700s to the middle 1800s, and they're quite specific to an area in Germany where they had these little streams or rivers where they had mills that are activated by the water, and they would grind these little marbles into these shapes. And
Really?
they're not beautiful and they're not valuable, but they are old.
Oh,
And
yes.
so they're
yes.
very nice.
Absolutely. That's wonderful. Our next group is the clay.
Lots of different kind of clay marbles. And just a note, the poor kids made their own marbles. They just rolled them up, stuck them in the oven, and those then became their marbles. And that's like this kind of a marble. You can make that and make hundreds of them. And the poor kids, that's what they use for marbles. But then there's these marbles that are like speckled, that look like a bird's egg.
Yes.
And then there's what they call Benningtons. People know about those. Those are blue, brown, or
Beautiful
mixed.
shine. Beautiful glass.
And then there's the more you fire clay, as you all know, it gets harder. So then they make some of these what they call chinas, which are a harder marble,
I see.
and some wonderful patterns that they put on them too.
That's amazing. Those are just lovely. Our next is the glass.
Well, most marbles are made out of glass, and because it's a molten process, that's where you get all the variety. And these marbles are glass, and there's many, many, many different kinds, but these are the most common.
Okay, all right. And how about agates?
Well, people who played marbles and played it competitively liked agates because, and that's what this group is, by the way. Agates were really preferred because they're they're a very hard stone, and they don't break easily. And so people really valued agates as shooters. If you look at these carefully, you can see that there is like a an eye to the
Yes.
marble.
Yes.
And so some people just collect that. And so there's lots of different kinds of agates, but they are really loved by marble collectors.
Oh, beautiful. They're just beautiful. Then our last group today would be the Steelies.
Shown here, basically these are not marbles, they're ball bearings that were used as shooters. But many times before you started your marble game, you ruled out using Steelies because they would bust the other marbles, break them up pretty badly. So they're just kind of nice to display, but they're not very good representations of marbles.
Sure, but they are marbles nonetheless.
They are marbles.
That's right,
And I
that's
got
right.
jars.
So you brought one very old marble. I believe you said it was the oldest in your collection?
Well, all these are probably the oldest
Okay.
in the collection, and that's
right.
that's the ones that were made in Germany. And it's I don't know if you can see this, but you see there's a flat spot on this.
Oh, yes.
What happened is they had these little German boys, and they were supposed to make cubes, and they were paid by the number of cubes they made in a day. And then they put these in this milling machine, and it would roll them. But when you see the presence of that flat spot, that's the flat spot of one of the cubes that wasn't necessarily large enough. But that really, you know, for somebody who wants the old marble, that's preferred. So you can see that it
Oh, I
was really
see.
made that way.
Yes, that
And can I
marks it.
jump back to agates?
Sure.
Agates also were very popular in an area of Germany, and I can't remember exactly the town, but these are all hand-cut agates. That means that there
Really?
was a big milling wheel, and these boys and men would lay down on this platform and physically make this marble round just
Oh,
by
my
turning
goodness.
it. And if you could get really close to this, you can actually see the facets on these marbles. So that
see.
you'll see agates that are machine made, but these are handmade agates. So they're
Wow.
old. They're
Now, Dion, I want to have you show us how to hold a marble when you shoot it.
okay. I'm going to use one of these.
Okay.
Most people, I don't know if you can see it, kind of go like this
Okay.
and try and shoot a marble. And you can shoot it across the table, but if you really want to get some power, you soon learn that you can roll the marble up onto your knuckle, and then you can shoot it
Oh,
all the way across the room.
Somebody just jumped
and you can knock out marbles that are in a ring. And that's so, and we used to practice, you know, that's what we did. We just practice
yes.
our marbles.
well, yes. And you were a master at Knuckle Boston, is that right?
Well,
Can you talk about that game just a little bit?
sure. Knuckle Boston is one of many games that we played, and I drew a little design here. This is what you have to remember that you go back to the clay playgrounds, and that's where we did marbles. But to play ringer or Knuckle Boston, you drew a 10-foot circle, and that's a big circle, and inside you put 13 marbles in those locations.
I see.
And then you would draw a line like this, and you'd stand back 10 feet and you'd roll to that line, and the person that got closest to the line would have the first shot.
Oh,
And what you had to do is, behind this line, you had to shoot these marbles out of the ring. If you got a really good marble player, he could stand there and walk around and shoot all those out before you even get a turn.
really?
So there is a lot of skill to shooting marbles.
I can imagine. It would take a lot of practice.
Lots of fun too.
Now, if our viewers wanted to go somewhere to see wonderful marble collections, where might they travel?
There are two locations close which I'd like to recommend.
Okay.
One is called the Toy and Miniature Museum in Kansas City. It's at a university, and I can't tell you what university it is, but it is. You look it up. It's on the internet, but it has a world-class, probably the largest collection of marbles displayed in 3 rooms. I mean, it's a huge
Oh,
collection.
my.
And the other one is Lee's Marble Museum in York, Nebraska, just off of the interstate, a half mile. And that is a very nice collection of marbles too. And it's not too far if you want to see it.
Those both sound fascinating. I'd like to visit both. Could you tell us a little bit about the Great Plains Marble Society?
Yeah, I think 13 or 14 years ago, I decided that it'd be fun to have other marble collectors to get together. So we created the Great Plains Marble Society, and we've been having meetings all this time. And we have 3 meetings a year, and one of the meetings is a marble show where you bring all your marbles and try and sell them.
Oh, I see.
And learn more about marbles.
Sure, sure. So there's a lot of local interest about
Yeah,
marbles.
and you can Google that too and find it or get in touch with me.
Sure. Dion, thank you so much for being with us today. As our little jar says, you have obviously not lost your marbles.
See, it's
right?
empty, so I haven't lost
That's
any
right.
marbles.
And I know our audience has definitely become the beneficiary of your wit and your wisdom today, and we thank you.
Well, thanks.
Thanks. Live and Learn will continue after this.
Halloween is coming. All Hallows Eve. That's long. We shortened it. To Halloween. Ooh, are we gonna have fun this month? And we have a very spectacular guest with us today. You will see him, a portion of him. He is Scott Colburn, and you've probably heard him on KZUM radio right here in Lincoln for about 30 years. And he has a face and a voice and some stories to tell. In fact, this is the guy who's in charge of all of the ghost tours, the bus tours that go around Lincoln. They're all full, unfortunately. Fortunately for him, unfortunately for us, but we're going to have a big party at the end of the month anyway, and we'll have some ghost stories for you. So I hope you're ready for some ghost stories. Welcome. Happy Halloweeny. This is your time of the year, isn't it, Mr. Scott?
Hey, Lita, thanks for having me here. It's going to be fun. The Ghosts of Lincoln bus tours are indeed sold out. Ghostsoflincoln.com is the website. We have fun every year. It's family friendly, and we, as importantly, get stories from the very people that ride with us. And I'd like to tell a couple of those stories today.
Now, you've been organizing these stories for a long time, haven't you?
I started when I was 2 years old.
Yeah, right. What happened to your body?
Dale Bacon was the first host. And when Dale and I sat down and tried to figure out a larger vision, I entered the picture, and we've been doing it now for many years. Dale's deceased, God bless him, and one of the stories I'll tell this morning comes from Dale's archives. My body, this is the quickest weight loss that I've ever had in my life. I mean, this is great, isn't it?
You look very trim, my dear.
I'm loving this now. Yeah.
All right.
Just floating around here.
Okay. Where are we going to begin, Mr. Scott?
Let's take our first story here from the Nebraska State Penitentiary.
Okay.
This is a great story. I owned a bookstore years ago in Indian Village, and one morning, an individual walked in, looked a little bit distressed and haggard. So I offered a cup of coffee and I said, "How are things going?" And they proceeded to tell me about what had happened the night before as a guard in one of the towers at the Nebraska State Penitentiary.
Now, was this a long time ago?
To help protect the identity of this individual, I'm going to use a non-gender description and say it's between 15 and 20 years ago.
Okay. So this is the old state penitentiary?
No.
Oh.
No. So the individual told me that the night before they'd been in the tower as a guard, and from their vantage point, they had a great line of sight directly down into the soap factory building. They could see the big windows that were during daylight to allow the daylight into the building. As the individual stood in the guard tower, they could see what looked like a male inside this supposedly empty, deserted, lockdown building trying to open a window and get out. So they dispatched a security team that searched the building from top to bottom. There was nobody there. A short time later, the same guard looks down and through that big window that's locked securely again sees an individual on the inside trying to break out. So the second time, a security team is again dispatched, and in addition to finding nobody in the building, they go through the entire Nebraska State Penitentiary and do a bed count. Everybody supposedly is accounted for. As you might guess, the individual looks down a third time and sees somebody inside the soap factory building trying to break out. So the third security team is dispatched. They go through the building from top to bottom, don't find anybody. And this time, not only do they do a bed check, but they physically enter every single cell and physically touch every single inmate in the Nebraska State Penitentiary to make sure that there's nobody that's hiding someplace and there's bedclothes curled up and a blanket rolled up to simulate somebody laying in bed. So that comes from the Nebraska State Penitentiary, and that was told to me personally by one of the guards the very morning after the incident.
So what was the outcome? We don't know.
We don't know. We also don't know about the old tower that sometimes reappears, as my late friend Dale Bacon used to say, when conditions are just right. This was a guard tower at the Nebraska State Penitentiary that a guard, despondent over some personal difficulties, apparently took his own life. God bless him. So supposedly, to the legend now, as the story goes, when conditions are just right, some of the other guards, out of the corner of their eye, will catch a flicker, much like a mirage, at the very end of a long highway in a hot afternoon, that sort of flickering, hazy picture. And out of the corner of their eye, they look over, and that guard tower, which has since been torn down, reappears.
Ooh.
Potter's Field is located to the south and west of the Nebraska State Penitentiary. And again, folklore and tradition, legend states that when, quote unquote, conditions are just right, if you're out there at Potter's Field, sometimes you might see some very unusual lights floating around. We might call them orbs. We don't know what they are.
All right, no resolution there though, just question marks.
You know, sometimes in these stories, the resolution is not as important as the consideration of what this might mean to us. And I think some people that are interested in ghosts and these sorts of things, it may stem from questions about what happens when we die. Is there indeed life after death? What part of, if any, what part of us continues?
Okay, now from the Nebraska State Pen, where are we going?
Let's go to the Nebraska State Capitol.
All right.
And this again is from the archives of my late friend Dale Bacon. Back in the early days of these tours, he would do a much smaller version and occasionally stop, and people would get out and walk around. Obviously better for a public building than a private residence. And so he'd acquired a couple of stories from the Nebraska State Capitol. So they pulled up. He said, go ahead and walk through the Capitol. It was daylight, it was open. And two women walked in, and they said, let's find a restroom. They walked down a long hallway, and at the end of the hallway, they saw this guy standing there looking at them. And they said, excuse me, could you help us? Where are the restrooms? Well, he just looked at them and turned and walked into what appeared to be an open doorway of an office. And these two women said,
He was rude.
How rude. Well, at least we know he's down there. Let's walk down and we'll find out where the restrooms are. And so they walked down there, and they walked in. There was a young lady behind the counter at a desk working. And they said, excuse us, could you direct us to the bathroom? And the clerk said, sure, and gave directions. And the two women said, You know, you were a lot more polite and helpful than that man who just entered here. We tried to talk to him in the hallway. He would have nothing to do with it. He ignored us, very rude, and just walked in here. And the clerk looked at them and said, I've been here since 8 o'clock this morning, and you're the first 2 people that have walked in that door. Or we had the story that I just got recently within the last 20 days from Stan. Stan used to be a roofer at the Nebraska State Capitol, a coppersmith. Why would you use copper for a roof? Because it lasts forever. But you've got seams that you have to fix. So you employ a roofer, a coppersmith. Stan was out there on the roof one day, and to access this roof, he had to go through the law library, go through a window, climb down a ladder onto the roof. So he's working with solder, with acid, and making sure these seams are good. Of course, if the seam is not, they'll get a leak downstairs. Well, unbeknownst to him, underneath the copper sheet, there was a pool of water from a recent rain. And when you mix copper and water, solder and acid, it can be volatile. So it literally exploded, throwing hot solder and acid all over his face. He was temporarily blinded. He couldn't see. He's out there alone on the roof. Suddenly, he feels an arm and a hand take his arm and gently lead him over to the ladder. He's assisted up the ladder into the law library, and he's led through the law library into the corridor, and he walks down to the end of the long hallway, calls out to a friend, and says, Pinky, I've been hurt. Please come help me. And at that point, this presence stops. But that was one could say, the start of a relationship that he had. He guessed that this presence was female. It was not scary. In fact, it probably helped save his eyesight. He was taken immediately to the hospital. His eyes were flushed out, and he's fine now. So that female presence, that ghostly unseen presence, who was seen or heard in the law library when nobody else was there, books falling off of shelves.
Is she still there?
Well, when they started the renovation, doing the exterior facade and repointing all that stuff, it ceased.
It's what?
She ceased to come around.
She ceased?
Yes, so nobody knows, at least Stan doesn't know, what's happened there. So we've got 2 stories from the Nebraska State Capitol. I could throw in another story that would be about a UFO from the state capitol. But we've got another one here too. And
Okay.
this is one of my favorites.
All right.
This is just simply called The Little Girl, Her Father, and the Game of Checkers.
Aha!
And I see we've got a board right here for you players out
Just
there.
in case we have some spirits who want to play checkers, we're ready for you.
Well, on every Ghosts of Lincoln bus tour, we invite people to tell us stories. And we really encourage that. We love to hear from people. Sometimes the stories they tell us are on the tour next year. So one of these tours, Dale was standing at the foot of the stairs and thanking people. A little girl walked up with her father, and the little girl said, I've got a story for you. Dale said, great. And so she proceeded to tell a story with her father standing there of one day saying, Dad, let's play some checkers. And he said, okay. And so they played the game, and she beat him. And he said, my goodness, you're very good at this game of checkers. Let's play again, but this time I'm going to really try. She said, okay. And so they play again. Bingo, she beats him. Well, they play a third game, and she beats him 3 in a row now. So he says, my goodness, you're very good at this. Did you learn this at daycare, at preschool, at a friend's house? And she said, no, I learned it from Grandpa. And he said, honey, you know you couldn't have learned it from Grandpa because he died many years ago. And she said, oh, I know, but sometimes at night when I'm sleeping, he comes in my bedroom and we play checkers. And there you have it.
It's a charming story.
A little girl, her father,
Checkmate.
grandfather, and
Checkmate. Okay, very good. Listen, Halloween is a time for stories. It's a time for fun, really. All Hallows Eve. And I'm glad that your bus tours are very successful, but we're going to have a party, and we're inviting you. And it's coming up, so we're going to put this on the screen right now so you can pay attention. It'll be at the last day of the month. It's happening on the Thursday. It's our big Halloween party. It's going to be here at Aging Partners, Thursday, October the 31st. And of course, it's going to be right at the downtown Senior Center, and that's at 10th and O Street. Everybody get your costume out and have some fun, and come over about 10:30 in the morning. That's when the party is going to be starting, and we'll be having lunch at 11:30. We're going to have some ghost stories there then at the time. Now, if you want to join us, of course, it's important that they know that you're coming, so that there'll be enough food to go around for everybody and a chair for everybody. So the number to telephone is, this is for reservations, 402 area code in Lincoln, 441-7158. That's 402-441-7158. Happy Halloweeny, All Hallows Eve. I love you, headless man.
Boo!
Now you got to say boo with a little more scare to it than
Well,
that.
let's invite everybody to practice this. Ready? On the count of 3, everybody. 1, 2, boo!
1,
See?
2, boo.
You got to surprise people.
What happened to 3?
Yeah, you got to surprise people.
I'd like to shake your hand, but I can't find it.
Yep, that and a cup of coffee, right?
Scott Colborn, welcome. Welcome for the paranormal and the UFOs and the things that go bump in the night. That's he, Scott Colborn.
Yeah. It's good to be curious, and thanks so much, Lita. It's a fun
Really
time.
appreciate you being here, Scott. Thanks. Happy Halloween. Remember, it's never too late to live and learn. Boo.